Good morning. Let's get started. I'll open a command prompt and navigate to some directory and run a command. Don't worry about this command at this moment. Ng new. Okay. So this will take some time to run, and meanwhile we'll talk about what is Angular, and we'll get into Angular from today onwards. Okay. So Angular, you may already know it's a technology for writing, or you can call it as a framework for writing an application. So there is a difference between framework and library. Framework is pretty much has everything in order to write an application, while library is meant for performing only a specific task. React is a library, while Angular is a framework. Such as Angular has forms, validations, and even the way you can make HTTP calls is also provided in Angular and a lot of other stuff. Pretty much everything is covered. That's why Angular is termed as a framework rather than calling it as a library. While React doesn't know how to validate user input, React doesn't know how to make HTTP calls. You need to use some other libraries in your application when you're writing a React application. So React is a library which does only one thing. It is primarily concentrating on the view part, while Angular is not like that. Angular is a framework. It has pretty much everything, whatever it takes to write an application. So today we'll start an Angular application. And before jumping into code and all those things, we should understand what is component driven development. So in Angular 2 onwards, we will be writing components and we will club them in order to make an application. And this concept is not alien for us because you take any manufacturing company and pretty much they do the same thing. Say, go with the Maruti Suzuki and they build cars and they do the same thing. They build smaller components such as probably tires like this and a steering or mirrors and so on so forth. So these all are smaller components, the tires, mirrors, the steering and the body and all those things, and they club them to make a complete a car. So this car itself is a component, but it's a combination of other smaller components. The same thing applies in Angular. We are going to do the same thing. We will write smaller components such as header component, footer, home, and so on. And we will club them or assemble them to make a complete application. The same, just like car, the Maruti Suzuki does. So the advantage of uh, building a components with a combination of components is like you will have to build smaller components, and smaller components are always encouraged and they are easy to test. And another thing is they can be easily taken out and used in another project. So the tires built for one car are not specific to that car. Rather, they can be used in other cars as well. So that's reusability, one thing. And the second thing, they're easy to test and maintain. The smaller components are really easy to test and maintain. That's an advantage. And sometimes you don't need to build some components. Rather, you can buy components from third party or you can download from third party library. You can download third party libraries and hook in. For instance, the manufacturer never manufactures the engine. The Maruti Suzuki never manufactures their own engines. Rather, they buy from Ford. The reason they buy it from Ford, maybe it is feasible for them or it is profitable for them, or they may not have the skill set to build engines. Anything, the reason can be anything, doesn't matter. So they are buying it and they're hooking in that engine in their product. The same thing we may do it. We may not have expertise to build some components, or we may not want to waste time on something. It may be profitable for us to not build a component, rather download it from the internet or buy it from the internet if that product is commercial and hook in our application. Even that is also possible. So third party components can also be hooked in into your Angular application. So this concept is very, very close to the real world, any manufacturing company concept. Okay, so this command is running. And before going any further, let's talk about the installation. We need to do some sort of installation. One thing, you already have Node.js installed because we have gone through the Node.js session. So I assume that you have Node.js already installed. That is needed. And the next thing, you will run a command npm install Angular CLI. It is at Angular CLI -g. Install it globally. This CLI command line interface helps you set up the project because Angular project setup is a little complex. The reason is we are dealing with TypeScript, we are dealing with some new concepts where browsers won't support. So we need to backport them so that browser can understand. There are a lot of pieces that we need to take care of. So it may take a whole day to set up the project itself. Rather than wasting time on that, we can focus on our business requirements. So for that, we will use a utility by the name Angular CLI. This is also developed by, again, Angular team. So install it. I already have it installed. And once you install it, say ng-v. Ng is a short name for Angular CLI. It's a alias name. So this should give you the current version that is installed on your machine. So 1.6.6 is installed on my machine. And once that is done, to start a new project, you would run a command ng new. This is where I ran the ng new Angular UI. So here it is. Angular.ui is the name of the project. Ng new is the command to start a new project. This will create all the files needed and install the dependencies. What do you mean by dependencies? Dependencies are nothing but Angular because Angular is a dependency now for our project and all the dependencies of Angular itself because Angular also has some other dependencies and they will also be installed and pretty much everything would be set up for you with this one command and you will have an run working application once this command is successfully executed. So this may take up to 3 to 4 minutes. Let's give it some time once this is installed and we can focus on how to run this application and how to add our components. Oh yeah, okay. I think this question came up earlier also. I forgot to tell you. So there is something known as NVM, Node Version Manager. I don't have NVM installed, but you can go somewhere here and download the installer for Windows. So let me download it anyway. Okay, you have somewhere here. I'll paste this link in the window. download this one, go with, okay, I would go with NVM setup. That will have an exe and save it somewhere. Let's install this one. It says there is already one version installed. Do you want to take that control over? So I'm saying yes. So NVM will have control over it. Now NVM is installed on your machine. Okay, I don't get any errors, so looks like it is installed properly. Okay, it's 1.1.6. And now say NVM ls. When you say ls, it lists all the versions that are installed in Node. 7.10 is the version that is installed and that is being used. Now, if I want to use a new install a new version, it's very easy. You don't even need to download it. You will say nvm install. Probably 9.5.0 is the current latest version. I'll install it. So by default, it picks up the 64-bit version and it will download and install the version. So I would encourage you to have this tool, and this is really handy when you're working with in your company. Maybe your company project is using older version of Node and you want to try new features. In that case, it makes more sense. Okay, it says completed. Now run the. Okay, it's running npm also. It installs Node and npm, both latest versions. So the current version that I'm using Node is 7.10. Let the installation complete. I'll show you how to switch between the versions, because you may need to switch between the Windows versions whenever needed. Okay. So meanwhile, anyway, our ng new command is completed. It has created these files and downloaded all the dependencies which are needed. And finally, you have something to work with. There it is. So now you have two versions of Node installed, 9.5 and 7.10. It's taking longer than expected. Anyway, let it leave it alone. We'll come back and see when this is done. But I'll open this inside Visual Studio Code saying not here. So I'll say cd angular.ui. Let's close this. Say cd into the project folder and say code dot. This will open that folder inside Visual Studio Code. I can pretty much close this command prompt. Okay, so this is done here. The NVM installation is also done. Say NVM ls, you have two versions. If you want to switch, you'll say NVM use 9.5.0. This will ask for administration right. You should have admin rights to do that. And now when you say node minus v, it is now using 9.5, not 7.10 like that. So I'll again switch back. I'll say nvm use 7.10.0. Okay, nvm use like that. So there is no limit how many versions you can have, but again, it's a handy tool. Let's open a command prompt here and try to run this project. You don't need to do anything. It's everything set up. This project is now runnable. You'll say ng serve minus o to serve the application. Ng is again Angular CLI. So CLI is not just for setting up the project, rather it is also for running the project, building the project, compressing it, and lot of stuff it can do. A lot of stuff will slowly learn. So this ng-serve, actually for the first time, it takes a couple of minutes to run. It is a little slower when you run it first time because it takes your TypeScript files, convert them into JavaScript, bundles them, and finally opens a browser and runs that application. So all these things are done with this one command. So don't worry about these file structures. We'll come one by one and learn slowly. Doesn't make much sense to explain everything now, but you know what is tsconfig.json we have seen, and you know what is package.json. That's enough at this moment. And node underscore modules, you're familiar with that because all of your dependencies are under node underscore modules. When you go, this is where Angular code resides. So Angular is a framework. It is not one library, rather it is combination of many libraries, such as for animations, you have one library, for forms, you have one library. For HTTP, you have one, and a lot of others. All are downloaded. And if you go and check in the package.json file, you have your dependencies installed. Say Angular, and the version that we are using is 5.2 Angular version. And then we have some dev dependencies, Angular CLI. So Angular CLI is only for setting up the project and for developing the project. Doesn't make much sense to push it to production. So it is a dev dependency. And we have something like Jasmine for writing unit test and Protractor for writing end-to-end test. We have TypeScript also. As I said, TypeScript is only for development. It's not for production. So it is part of dev dependencies. Anyway, this command is again taking some time. Let's be patient. So it is starting the server on 4000. It will open the browser window itself. You don't even need to open it. So this is what you have, a basic stuff, some uh, the, some links for the documentation, and they'll say welcome to app. And this is what your car, something like this, a car. It's honestly, you have only one component here, but this is your the end product. So this is just a basic product in order to run stuff, and there is nothing involved. So what we will do is your entire source code resides in src directory. So I'll go in src, and inside app, your components reside. So what I'll do is I'll try to remove all of them so that we'll start with a clean slate and understand actually how this application is working. So don't worry about anything because end of this course, we'll try to set up this project manually. With an empty folder, we'll try to set up everything. So anyway, delete. I could have deleted the entire folder. So it's not a good time to show you how to set up now because that can drive you crazy. You don't have that much knowledge at this moment. And slowly, slowly we'll get to that. And finally, we'll from nothing to everything, we'll set up our own project without using Angular CLI. At this moment, CLI helps us to save some time. So I'm deleting even main.ts file. I'll go to index.html. That is the only page we have. It must be somewhere inside. Okay, src folder. And I'll remove this line of code as well. Don't worry what that means. Okay, so I've removed a bunch of files and assume that we are starting with a clean slate. We don't have anything. I'll go to src folder and try to create a folder app. And that's where my entire components reside. And I would like to have my car component, as I said, the big component that is nothing but our app component.ts. So the naming convention is app.component.ts. It's a convention. Again, if you don't like it, you can just ignore it. But I would like to follow this convention. The reason is even if I don't open the file, I know what is inside this. If the name would have been app.ts, you should open the file to understand what actually it contains. But when you have app.component.ts, without even opening the file, you know that, okay, it's a type component because we will be creating many types of files. So it's a good idea that you differentiate in the name itself. It's a convention, good to follow, even though it's not mandatory. So app.component.ts will create first component. So in Angular, whatever type you're creating, you'll first create a class. I told you yesterday that class is a type. So whatever you're doing it is a type. So create a class. We know how to create a class in TypeScript. I'll say app component. A simple class is created. Now, if you want to make it public or kind of make it available outside of this environment, outside of this file, you'll export it. All these things we have learned, and let me know if you don't understand anything. And this is our simple component. It's not actually component, it's a simple plain old class without any logic. I want to convert it into a component. So Angular gives you something known as a component decorator. We have even seen what is a decorator means. So Angular takes this class and attaches some code with the help of this decorator. Now this class is like a component with the help of this decorator. So all the logic, whatever it takes to convert this class into component is residing inside this component decorator. And now there is one error. It says cannot find name. The error is because the TypeScript compiler is not able to find what is component means. So I'm going to say import component from Angular core. So Angular core is a library and it has this component decorator in it. So you need to add a reference import statement. And now there are no errors. And this is our simple component. So what is this at Angular core? And there at Angular is the just nothing but a folder name here, if you notice inside at Angular. So that's how Angular team has decided to name their libraries. They put everything inside at Angular folder. And inside that you will have core library. So, so this component will have something like selector. Selector is nothing but the name that you're giving. I'll say app root, some name. Usually you'll go with snake casing here. Why do you go with snake casing? We'll talk about that. Not camel casing. You'll either differentiate stuff with a hyphen or underscore. Hyphen is pretty common. And you'll have some template. Template is nothing but HTML. So I'll say hello Angular. So I believe we have seen pretty much every concept here. We know what is a component. This is actually a component. I'm sorry. We know what is a decorator. And this is a decorator factory. Yesterday we have created. With the help of decorator factory, you can pass an object or a parameter. Something like I've created a deprecated decorator yesterday, which is which has a parameter target and of type function. And I have written something, but I cannot pass. Okay, let me comment this out. If I want to use this deprecated like this. But if I want to pass something, I cannot do it. I need to wrap this inside another function, or pretty much I need to create a closure and say deprecated, and this will accept object of type any. I'll cut this and paste it here, remove the name of the method and say return. And I'll pass some property like this. So component is also written something like this, a decorator factory, and you are able to pass an object. If you notice here, we are also passing an object here. And that object has selector and template properties, and we are passing it. Selector is nothing but the name that you're giving so that that can be used, because you're creating a component that should be hooked in somewhere. And template is nothing but HTML, because your component will have template, it will have some view. User can see that view, and that is nothing but your HTML. And I've written an H1 tag, a heading. So that's our first component, and very straightforward. I've created a class and decorated it. Let me know if you have any questions here. So we are not yet in a position to run this application. A component is created, but it cannot go on its own. Everything that you create in Angular should go inside a container by the name module. Again, this module term is very confusing. This is a module, but again, this is ES6 module. Don't get confused with ES6 modules and Angular modules. ES6 module is nothing but a file. Even this is a module because you're exporting it. Your app.component is also called ES6 module. While Angular module is something like a container. So you have a container and you put something, app component here or home component here or something like that. So it's like a cupboard in your home where you put your shirts or clothes somewhere, clothes inside a cupboard, something like a container. So we need to have that container. Let's go ahead and create one. Go to SRC folder and create a module, and that is called a module. That container is called module. As I said, you first need to create a class. Create something like this. I find it easy to do something like this. Create a class. We know how to create a class and then export it. And then decorate it. Say ng module like this. So there is one error. The error is pretty obvious because it's not able to find what is ng module. You can click on this bulb icon, or you can use control dot shortcut to help you with some suggestions. This Visual Studio Code is going to help you. So it says change the spelling to module, and that's not what is going to help us. But the second suggestion is clearly is what I want. So this ng module decorator is part of Angular core library, and I'm importing it. Now no errors. Here, how would you put how would you put your app component inside that container? The convention is you'll say declarations app component. See, an import statement is already automatically added. So when you type something, and this VS Code is smart enough to add even an import statement. That's why go with this IDE because it's going to help you a lot. Again, you can use any IDE, but I would rather prefer this one because it's uh, it's actually evolving and it's going to help you in lot of times. Okay. Anyway, I said declarations. It's an array and you may have more than one component. So that's our module. And this module is good. We have created a component, we have created a module, but we need to tell which is the first component to run. And that I would say with the help of bootstrap property. Bootstrap means the first component that would start the application. So I need to say app component. As you notice here is a little bit of common sense. It's an array, which means there can be more than one components bootstrapping. Usually that is actually you do something rarely, but there is an option you can start two components when the application starts. Even though we won't do that, usually you will have only one root level components, one root component and the remaining child. And to run this application, I need support from other modules. So I'll import other modules. I'll say browser module. So this browser module is part of say control dot, and this time VS Code has no clue from where to import this one. In that case, you need to go and manually import that. You'll say browser module. It is part of Angular platform browser library. This is a browser module. So it has features and to run your application inside a browser. One thing which I forgot to tell you is Angular is you can write websites using Angular, not just websites, but even mobile applications and desktop applications. So if you are dealing with say mobile application, you don't need this browser module. As we are writing websites, web applications, so we need this browser module. So I'm taking the help from browser module in order to run this application. So it's like you have this module and this module may be dependent on other modules. At this moment, our app module is dependent on another module by the name browser module. So we'll go ahead and add few more modules and there will be few more module dependencies and so on. But at this moment, this is where we stand. I'll summarize. We have done quite a lot of stuff here. First thing, I've created a class and exported it. I wanted to create a module, so I've decorated it with using ng module decorator. And then I said, okay, these are the components this module contains, and this is the first component to execute. And then I'm saying this module is dependent on another module, browser module. Browser module is inbuilt module, app module is a custom module. So that's app. We are not yet ready to run this application. Still, you are seeing some compilation errors. So in order to run this application, we need to be explicitly saying Angular that which is the first module to run. Why should we say? We actually have only one module in our application. Can't Angular find out that module is the only module to run? It cannot. The reason is in enterprise level application, you may have tens of modules. So you have to be explicit and tell Angular which is the first module to execute. Go ahead and create one main.ts file inside SRC, and you will say platform browser dynamic. So this is a function and part of this library, platform browser dynamic, and you'll say bootstrap module. And the module that we want to bootstrap is app module. Control dot, it will add an import statement. So this platform browser dynamic actually creates a platform because we are dealing with browser application. So it creates a browser platform for you and bootstraps the app module. From this bootstrapping, it goes to app module, and app module has a bootstrap property. It bootstraps component and it goes to app component. We have something like app root selector. So we need to consume that component. I'll go to my index.html and consume it. This is the use of that selector tag. Because HTML is case insensitive, it's a good idea that you don't use camel casing. Rather than saying app root, you will say app root because it doesn't make much sense in HTML, camel casing, because it doesn't differentiate between app root and app root. Both are same for HTML. Anyway, that's selected tag and I'm consuming it and we are ready to run our application. It says Webpack compiled successfully. Go back. See? So it has live reload. As soon as I change something, I don't even need to restart my or reload my browser. Go to component.ts, save this, and the browser is automatically reloaded, and you have your outcome like that. So what have we learned? We have done quite a lot of stuff. We have created a component first, and we have learned how to create a component and what is a selector and what a component contains. So that gave us a knowledge of a component, and every component will have some view, and that view is nothing but a template. One thing. And second thing, we have learned that every component should go inside a container, and that container is called module in Angular. And we have created a module inside declarations array, every component goes in. And then we have learned that there has to be one component or at least one component in the bootstrap array. And then in order to run this application inside browser, you need browser module. Because we are dealing with web application, we need this browser module. If you're writing some mobile applications, you don't need this browser module because your application would be running on a mobile device, not inside browser. If you're writing a desktop application, something else is not needed. Anyhow, we have imported this browser module. As you can notice, this is also an array. So this app module may be dependent on some other modules. It's not one, it can be more than one. Now I'll go to main.ts file and you have logic for bootstrapping. You will use platform browser dynamic function and call bootstrap module on top of it to create app module. As I said, this platform browser dynamic creates a platform, and on top of that, you're creating bootstrap module function by passing the module that you can bootstrap. Can you have more than one bootstrapping component? Yes, you can because it's an array. Can you have more than one bootstrapping module? No, you cannot because this is not an array. It accepts one module type. So there can be only one root level module and any number of children can be there, only one. So let me put something in a diagram so that you can understand the execution flow. This is important. So what happens actually is main.ts would be executed, and then after that, the main.ts has logic to bootstrap your app module. So app module would execute, and then app module will trigger the bootstrapping component, so which is app component. So this is the execution flow. There is more to it here. Actually, the first time index.html loads. This index.html actually loads this main.ts. You will have a script tag to load this main.ts, and this would be downloaded. Once this is done, this would run, and this would trigger app module, this would trigger app component, and so on and so forth. Like this, the bootstrapping process works. So where is this index.html? Let's go ahead and see how this looks like. Go to src folder, and here you have index.html. If you notice here, this index.html is plain HTML file except this new tag, and there are no script tag. I told you that there are some script tags and that it will start the bootstrapping application, but where are those script tags? Okay, what's going on here? Let's kill this and say ng build. Ng build will build your application and creates one dist directory. It's like the outcome. If you're dealing with Java, you may have a jar file. If you're dealing with C Sharp, you may have a exe file or something like that. Here, you'll have a dist folder, and that's your output. Let's see this ng build, what it does. Okay. If you notice here, the dist folder is created, and open this folder. See, you have index.html also created here, and you have some bundles like polyfill.bundles, main.bundle. Main.bundle is the actual code that we have created. If you go and check hello Angular, you'll have that string here. So your TypeScript code is clubbed, your module also clubbed. You should have somewhere app module. You have somewhere here app module, everything is clubbed into main.bundle. And then you have polyfill.bundle also, because the polyfill is to make sure that your application runs inside the older browsers. So if you don't want to support older browsers, you can remove this. And then you have styles.bundle. What actually this Angular CLI does is it takes your CSS styles also and creates one JavaScript file and bundles all of your styles. And you have vendor bundle.js. Vendor bundle is which will have your Angular code. It's like your entire Angular library is bundled into one file, all of the libraries like this. So the important thing to note here is index.html. Go and say Control Shift F to align things properly. Control Shift F is the shortcut here. Anyway, so it has some script tags. This is what I was talking about. Your main.bundle, your vendor bundle, your styles bundle, and these scripts are dynamically. So this index.html is actually created dynamically. And this is where you will have main.ts triggered, app.module, and app.component. So your Angular loads first, and then your code loads first. Main.ts is code that is written by ourselves. So we have written that. So when you go to when main.bundle.js, you should have somewhere the main file or bootstrap module function. See, here it is. It's hard to understand the code, and we don't really care what it contains. What we want to learn is TypeScript. What we want to focus is on our TypeScript, not on this. But somewhere you have this main.ts. And this is what the execution flow. I want you to understand this. This is important. It's a little tricky and a lot of pieces you need to take care of. Actually, when you are creating Angular CLI application, excuse me, Angular CLI all does this everything for you, bootstrapping and all those things. But I've deleted those files because I want you to understand this from scratch. So we have created ourselves all these files and we have bootstrapped the application. You may not be doing this manually when you're dealing with Angular CLI, but at least write it a couple of times so that you'll know what's going on. Okay, so this dist folder is the outcome of your hard work, and this is what you will deploy to server. This is enough. This is the only thing that you need in order to deploy it to production or any server. You don't need this source code. You don't need anything. This dist. So if you want to again enhance it further, because if you notice the size of this bundle, probably it is huge. Open this in folder explorer and go to dist folder, and you have main.bundle which is 5 KB, but you have vendor bundle which is 2 MB. Probably you may want to reduce that, because if it is huge, the size of the application or your application load times would be higher. So we want application to load faster. So in production, what you do is you'll say ng build minus minus prod. You build it for production. So your Angular CLI will compress that. As you might have noticed this, the CLI is helping you a lot. You don't even need to worry about how to compress the files. Everything is in place. How you don't even need to worry about how to bundle files. Everything is being bundled for you like that. So it actually removes the dist folder and then regenerates it. So the whatever that dist is generated, that you will deploy to the server. Be it how can you deploy? And there are various ways that you can deploy. You can deploy it to Node server, which we have created when working with Node.js application. You can deploy it to Tomcat, Apache, IIS, or something known as Nginx, and a lot of other ways you can deploy your application. It's up to you how you want to deploy it. And different companies do it in different ways. And it's usually, I mean, the CDK does it on the Nginx. Every front-end application usually is deployed on Nginx server rather than using IAS or something like that. So whenever you run it for the first time, it is slow and that is expected. It's okay because this is going to be part of your build, be it Jenkins builds or Bamboo builds or whatever it is. You have the build system or even Heroku, where we will be will be deploying our application. This goes in there. So the delays, uh, it's okay. It's bearable. And we don't need to worry about this delay. Okay, it has generated bundles. If you notice here, there's no, I don't see any vendor bundle here, but anyway, Polyfill's bundle has 59 KB and main bundle is 152 KB. Actually, the size has come down. It was 5 KB to 100 K. Probably it has went up, and that's okay anyway. When you're working with actual code, when you have a lot of code, actually it goes down. But go to dist folder and see what actually happened here. So go to main bundle. This is what actually happened. So I believe probably this vendor bundle is removed from the this dist folder because that's what the optimization is. Actually, the vendor bundle, you don't need it when you're compressing that stuff. So the CLI will take care of that. We'll talk about that, and that is called AOT, ahead of time compilation. But at this moment, that's more to take. So we'll just limit our discussion to only this compression. You cannot read this code, nobody can, but actually it is working code and your application works. This code, you'll take it and deploy it in production and it is optimized. You have, if you notice here, the sizes are very, very less as compared to earlier sizes. Earlier it was like in MBs, 2 MB. 2 MB is a lot of code, but now it is compressed. Who is doing all these things? Again, CLI is taking care of that uh, production build. Okay, let's come back and run the application ngserve. When you say ngserve, it doesn't open a browser, but when you say -o, it opens the browser window. Let's run this, and now we'll go ahead and create a second component. A component is nothing but a feature here, so I would like to put each and every feature inside a separate folder. This is how I would like to do it. I can put home component here itself, but again, it becomes hard. So I want every feature to have its own folder. So I'm creating a home folder here, and I'll say home dot component dot ts. You know how to create a component. First, you'll create a class, home component, and this suffix is also a convention. If you don't want to have it, it's up to you. But Angular style guide says that you have it. So in order to convert this, you'll use a component decorator, and component decorator accepts an object as a parameter, and you'll have a selector so that this can be consumed from HTML. And I'll have some template. I'll say homepage. Simple. Component is created, but there is one error. You'll say control dot and import a statement. Save this. Our component is created, but we have learned that a component cannot exist on its own. It has to go inside a container. I'll go to module and add this inside declarations. home component, add an import statement. That's it. A module. I've added an entry inside module. Now I'll go to my app component and consume that home component. How can you consume that? You'll just say app home. This is the selector of that component. Yes. See, now you have home page. If you say right click and inspect the element, you will notice the hierarchy. You have your app root component. That's the actual top level component. And inside that you have home component and you have h1 tag there like that. Okay, what happens if you don't add this entry to the module? So I don't add it. Let's see what happens. No errors here, but you'll have a runtime error. So go to console tab to check the errors. So you have an error and it says template parsing error. App home is not a known element. What actually it does is whenever it looks for the tag, it finds out the tag. Your Angular goes and checks for that tag inside that module. So it doesn't look out in the entire application, rather it goes and looks in the module can whether it will find that component or not. So if you don't have an entry inside component, your application will not, I mean, if you don't have an entry inside your module, your application will not run and this it throws an error. Even though you have that file available and that component doesn't have any compile time errors, still you will face a runtime error. So you should add it to the module. So modules are for organization purpose. You are logically organizing things. So you have some components and you're logically organizing. You may have more than one module. You may have different kind of components here and some other kind of components here, like a grouping stuff. You want to group logically and you'll create a module. So far we have only one module created, but in future we'll add some more modules and try to separate or isolate components and other kinds of files. So I've created a component manually, but you can use Angular CLI to do that. Let's go ahead and see how we can do, how you can ask Angular CLI to do that. You can say ng generate. I'll create a about component. I don't want to have inline style, so I say -is. Don't worry about all these things at this moment. I'll say spec false because I don't want to generate test files also. Okay. ng generate component is the command. See, it has created one file about.component.ts folder inside the about folder, and it has updated the app.module.ts. Go to about component. This is the file that is generated automatically. Some things are not needed. We don't have knowledge of that. So I'll remove that, these styles also, and I'll remove everything. At this moment, we don't need it, but that was the code that was automatically generated. This is about component. And when you go to module, even your CLI added about component inside declarations. So it saves some time. If you don't want to manually create all these files, it saves some time. You can use Angular CLI generate command to generate the components. So I would say don't generate it initially. Try to write it at least 4 or 5 times until you get acquainted with the syntax. Once you are familiar with the syntax and once you feel comfortable, then you can use this generate command to generate it to save some time. So we'll stop here. We have created a couple of components and we know how to consume a component as well. We'll stop here. Tomorrow we'll see some other concepts. Let me know if you have any questions. Let's push these changes to GitHub repository so that you'll have access to the code. Let's git init. On GitHub repository, on GitHub, I'll create a new repository. Say Angular UI. Just grab this remote address and paste it here, and we are ready to push. Okay, this is where we have some README, and that documentation is not really helpful for us. So I'll go back and modify even the README file. Go to readme.md. I'll say to run this app, you need to say npm install first. Make sure you have Angular CLI installed, and then say ngserve -o. So this is the only file that is modified. I'll say git add all, git commit. Here it is. You should have Angular CLI installed, and then you would say npm install, because I didn't push node underscore modules folder here, and that will download all the dependencies for you. And then finally you'll say ngserve -o to run this app. So that's it for today. We'll meet tomorrow, same time again, and take it further.